This was intentional. What's actually happened here is not what's being reported. One thing you learn as an investigator, and that was part of my job in the military, is that usually right after an event occurs, you're gonna get the truth. As close to the timing of the event as you can get. The farther out away you get from the event, the less reliable the information becomes. So when the initial call came in at 2:20 from the Philippine crew stating that it had just happened, that was the truth. That was the absolute truth, that it had just happened. And then after the interview, sometime later, they're saying, oh no, it was actually an hour before. That's a made-up fictitious story, trying to cover up actions and trying to rewrite their little history here. Now we're going to go through this step by step and show why this can't have occurred the way it's being reported. All right, what you're seeing here is the red line. Here's the ACX crystal. Here's the location of the Fitzgerald. Here, you see it turn toward the Fitzgerald. Then you see an event. Here, it turns and then continues course for a while, and then inexplicably turns all the way back. Now, there's more to this track than I'm going to cover on another tab, but we're going to cover a few things in this article right here, that is the Daily Wire. First of all, if I can get down to it, Japan's Coast Guard updated the estimated time of the collision from 2:20 to 1:30. Initially, the ACX crystal said the collision had just happened when they called in the accident at 2:25. However, after interviewing crew members, they believe the collision occurred nearly an hour earlier. That just doesn't make sense. Even from a sniff test and a common sense test, the initial call-in would have said, yeah, about an hour ago, we hit somebody and we've returned to the accident. We've confirmed that. That's what they would have said. But the U.S. Navy said, no, we're going to stick with the 2:20 timing, and that makes a lot more sense looking at the tracks. And it's here, the last thing I'm going to cover is, speaking with GMA, reporter Matt Gutman concluded, the investigation will hinge on two major questions: how such a ship with some of the best radar in the world and multiple officers tasked with watching it failed to notice a stadium-sized cargo ship approaching, and why this happened. Because it didn't happen. That's not what happened. And I have that was a strange article down there, but I have a theory looking at this from just an investigative standpoint. Now, we're going to go to, real quick, they interviewed the guy who owned the ship. According to Ryota Kawada, a spokesman for Nippon Yusen, the Japanese shipping company that chartered the Crystal, the ship left port of Yokohama on Tuesday, but Mr. Kawada declined to say where it was going. I think that's key. It seems like a little thing, but it's a big thing. Now I'm going to close this tab out. And here, on this particular page, when we're talking about the kind of weird start to the investigation, another investigator makes this comment. There's something odd in the photo showing the damage to the USS Fitzgerald. Assuming the ACX crystal hits the Fitzgerald at an oblique angle near the bridge, then why no hull damage forward of the bridge? One would expect that the ACX crystal would have scraped the entire hull forward of the initial impact, as it would have pushed the Fitzgerald out of the way. And there's a guy who comments agreeing with exactly that. What we're seeing in this collision is an attempt to bifurcate. And here's another comment on another article, and like I said, there's a lot of people out there smarter than me. The Fitzgerald's radio room was apparently taken out. Wait, so they don't have some redundancy there? Even a spare portable radio in a locker for emergency use? As a former military aviator, every helicopter crew on the Fitz would at least have an emergency radio in their flight vest capable of calling for help on guard. If the accident occurred at 1:30 here, the U.S. Navy would have called first. Here's what I think happened. And I know it's going to be tinfoil and everybody's going to say, oh, Dave's gone over the edge. But we have been talking about electronic warfare, and we've been talking about this issue with North Korea and China. Here we have a ship with the owner declining to say where it was going, sailing along, and then it changes course here toward the location of this event. Then something happens, and it turns 90 degrees away from the event. Then starts to kind of resume a strange course here. Here, it's there, it's there, it's there, it's there. And some time passes. No report of a collision. Nobody gets on the horn and says, hey, we think we hit something. Nothing. Then they turn back around. Now, if you look closely, these little arrows indicate the attitude of the ship. Comes back to the location, and I know it kind of overlaps here, but then it turns, and then it resumes from behind its original attitude and direction of travel from where it was before. See, here's what I think happened. They came here, they have something aboard that they were testing to disable a ship. They disable the ship, knock out all of its electronics, come back, get back by, realize they can't hit it this way because that would cause them to be seen as at fault. So they turn back around and they attempt to bifurcate the ship from the original direction of travel. They hit it as hard as they can and then report that they've had some accidental collision with the ship, safe in the knowledge that they're going to be the first ones reporting it. And then continue on their way. That would explain why the crew said it just happened, and why the Navy crew didn't report it here when they saying it initially, falsely saying it initially happened here. And that's why the Navy spokesman says it happened at 2:20. So they did something to disable the ship. Or maybe the ship was already disabled, who knows? Maybe this was more of a coordinated effort than I'm giving it credit to be. But the point being, they made a change in direction here, change in direction here, change in direction here, and then another inexplicable 180-degree turn all the way back around behind. See, if they came here and they just saw the ship to render aid, they would have just done a right-hand turn and gone this way, but they didn't. They went and they made a giant left-hand turn all the way around this way to go back around this. Like I said, this giant container ship isn't a speedboat. So that's my theory here. And with the fact that we did not get any kind of a report from the Navy ship, which has redundant systems to be able to avoid these types of things, the evidence we see from the collision, and let's see if I can pull that up. Here we go. Here's the picture. Let's see if there's a better one down here. There's not on this tab. It might be on this one. Hold on. Okay, here you go. Here is the front of the ship. Front port can tell damage right on the very front leading edge of this ship. And here's the starboard damage here. So it dang near cut the thing in half. And according to the report of how the accident went down, it was overtaking from the rear and hit it. You're saying it just bounced off, and why is there no damage here? Why didn't it hit it? If these, at the last minute, within 100 yards, both of these crews would have been trying to turn to avoid the accident, because even eyeballs would have told you you were going to get hit. This ship was setting dead in the water. I guarantee it was setting dead in the water, and this ship tried to hit it and tried to sink it and failed. And that's what happened. And that's why we don't have any kind of a communication of any kind from that ship speaking of the Navy ship, at 1:30. No communications whatsoever. Because at that time, that was when initially this nefarious cargo ship and its cargo disabled this ship and took out the electronics. Now I'm guessing if they were working for the Koreans or the Chinese or the Russians, they didn't know whether it was going to work or not. So let's go back to the track. So here it is. It detects the ship. It moves toward the ship. It tries its electronics warfare, and it works. And it disables the ship. So now it's like, it takes this time to report in to its leaders and says, it worked. The ship was completely dead in the water. What do we do next? They wait. They get orders here. Turn around and sink it. Sail right over top of it. So what do? They turn around. They come back. They circle around. They nail the thing. They hit it. Realize they haven't sunk it. And then hang around for a minute and then report it as an accident. Saying we had this accident, and that's what happened at 2:20. And the person reporting it doesn't realize what they're doing at the time, saying how could they explain all of this? And so they're like, oh, no, wait a minute. Say we hit him here, and that's why we came back. So it took them a while to get their story straight about what happened. And that would explain why we didn't hear anything from the Navy ship until here. And like the guy said earlier, that all of the helicopter crew aboard this ship would have had the ability redundantly at 1:30. If the accident really occurred here at 1:30, they would have had the ability to call in and report it, but they didn't. All they had here was a loss of power and loss of communications. No collision. Dead in the water. They track up here. They receive the orders. They go back. They try to finish off the ship, and they fail in finishing off the ship because they clearly didn't have the right technology. They didn't have the right attitude. They just basically, it was at night, and they tried to do it. They almost succeeded. Or maybe they just underestimated how hard it is to sink a U.S. Navy destroyer with simple impact. I know this sounds all tin hat, but folks, at 1:30, if one of our ships got hit by a cargo container, that's when the first report would have come in. We could have walked and chewed gum. There would have been a mayday call. There would have been people trying to deal with and scramble to deal with the effect of the collision. And there would have been people also saying mayday, 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 calling the Navy, saying, hey, we got hit, calling 7th Fleet Command. We don't hear anything from the Navy at 1:30. The first time anything is reported is an hour, supposedly, later, and it's from the Philippine ship? That makes no sense, folks. That makes absolutely no sense. And the only way this happens, where this ship could get hit that hard, is if it was dead in the water. And as we see, we'll go back to the picture again. There's a better picture here, darn it. As we can see, okay, this thing didn't scrape along the bow of it. It hit it dead on. It came in at 45 degrees or greater, or less, and hit this thing. And if you can imagine in your mind's eye, this side of the ship goes down, this side of the ship goes up, and below the water line, the stress causes a crack along the keel of the ship, and that's where the water came in. And it pushed it out of the way. And that's when we had the problem, and that's why the Navy is saying at 2:20, that's when it got hit. Now, I'm sure there's going to be a whole lot of revised stories now because they don't want the world to know that there is something out there that if it gets within a certain distance of one of our ships, it can completely disable it. But that's the only thing that makes sense with the evidence here. It's the only thing. And as you can see here, this ship hit it dead on. And I'll go back to the whole hitting a bullet with a missile with a bullet thing. That it hit it dead on, right across the bow, like this, and just missed a little bit toward stern, and that's why it pushed it out of the way and caused this scraping. Folks, this was terrorism. This was absolutely terrorism. Somebody has developed the ability to get within a certain distance of our ships and disable them. This crew just didn't affect the final stage of this properly and sink this ship, because that's what they were trying to do. It's clearly what they were trying to do. They were trying to knock out a Navy ship and keep their and then say it was just an accident. I don't know how you take anything else away from this based on this track. Because if they hit it here and they smacked it at 130 right here and they thought they hit something, all stop. They would have cut the engine, said, whoa, 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 back up. And it would have been right here. They wouldn't have continued on and 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 on, and then turned around and then came all the way back here, all the way past the event, and then turned around the attitude to be the exact same what it was before, sailed through that area, and then back up here, and then, nuh-uh, sorry. And the fact that the guy who owned the ship wouldn't disclose where the destination of the ship was, why would you not? Why would you not do that? So, anyway, this went a lot longer than I thought it would, but I think we've pretty much covered the details of this. There's no other way to look at this. If somebody out there can explain why a U.S. Navy ship got smacked at 1:30, and not only did the Philippine crew not call it in, neither did the Navy crew, and you're saying nobody, and like the one guy said, I showed you, there's helicopters aboard, and there's helicopter crews that have radios. They wouldn't have been damaged in the collision. They could have called in the guard channel. There would have been a report from the Navy at 1:30. But the first communication came from the Philippine crew at 2:20. And that's what the Navy confirmed in its initial briefing. And that's what the crew said. They said at 2:20, the collision just happened. Not at 1:30. So, anyway, 18 minutes, too long of a video, but here we go, folks. New form of terrorism. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks.